Hello, dear teachers or future teachers. Today we're going to talk about teaching beginners. It's quite important because sometimes it might be a bit challenging for new teachers, especially if you decided to try a direct approach. So let me share my presentation with you and let's start. So basically, it's not only about typical lessons with beginners. Today, we're going to talk about teaching beginners in English. And the first question is, why? Why not should we do that? And of course, before we start talking about different techniques and different things that might be useful for you, we need to agree on some like ground rules and some things that we all share um, connected to the reasons of such a decision. So, like, why in English? First of all, I think you would agree that when we want to learn a foreign language, we need lots of comprehensible input. I think you have already watched the video about that. And you do realize that students need to hear the language, they need to hear it a lot. But when they have classes just twice a week, and probably they do some homework, but like generally they encounter the language just like 3 times a week. It's not enough for them. But even if they don't have any more time for their studying, um, during these 60 minutes of their lessons, they do need to hear lots of language. And the only way to provide them with all this necessary input is to do everything in English and to help them to like hear the English they know. That's why it's really important to make your input comprehensible. And later we will talk about how we can do that. The second reason, which is quite important from my point of view, is that we need to establish this idea that language is a tool rather than a subject. The difference is that when we talk about a subject like mathematics, physics, I don't know, biology, everything that we study at school, we are talking about the knowledge that we need to acquire. So it's like there is some knowledge and the teacher probably possesses it. And the student is something like an empty vessel who just wants to um, listen to the teacher and remember everything. But usually the result is that the student can recall everything, can retell the rules, can remember maybe some forms of the verbs, etc. But at the same time, many students who graduated from school and were quite successful there, sometimes they know a lot about the language, but they still can't use the language efficiently. Yeah, they can't use it as a tool. They can't um, use this language to convey the meaning they want. So it's important to show them that English is like any other language, just a tool of communication. And for example, during your lesson, if you want like your student to close the window, you can fast say it in Ukrainian, yeah, and you can ask them just to do that because it's not connected to the lesson, right? It's something that is, so to say, just technical thing, yeah. But at the same time, you can use this opportunity to show them that English language might be used in the same way, and it will be easy for your student to understand what you want. But your choice of English as a tool will show them that English is equal in this case to their native language. Yeah, it can be equally used if they want, if you want them to understand something, to do something. You will notice that students might achieve faster results if you use English only during your classes. It might be surprising for you as a teacher because many teachers who struggle with using English in their classrooms at the beginning, now they might think that it's something artificial, something just like modern, fast, and in reality, it doesn't influence the results so much. But if you do everything correctly, you will notice that it really does. And these faster results will give your students the feeling of achievement, which is really important, especially at the beginning, because probably you know that motivation is quite unstable thing. So at the beginning, when you start doing something, it's very natural to be motivated, encouraged, inspired, and do lots of different things to achieve results. But if you don't see these results, this motivation just fades away. So it's useful, yeah, to see that if you do something, you get the result and it motivates you to do more. And unfortunately, not every teacher is capable of using only English during their lessons. And this might be an interesting reason for you to try, because I think the more tools you have in your set of techniques, the more valuable you are as a teacher, and the more students you might get in future as well. Of course, not every technique, not every method is equally useful for everybody. But as a teacher, you might have more benefits if you can use more tools. So it's useful just to know how to do everything and to choose and to decide whether it's useful or not, rather than when you just can't do it. All right, so let's start talking about these reasons with language as a tool. As I have already explained, that means that you don't just learn about the language, but you learn the language and how to use it. And let's think, what can teachers do to show the students that language is actually a tool, not a subject, and not a something like just knowledge about something. What we can do is given instructions in English. So as I said in my example, like if you want your student to close the window, or all the other instructions that you want them to hear during the lesson. For example, open your books, go to page 23, look at the picture. All these things can be said in English. We present vocabulary without translation. Yeah, it means that you don't have to translate every single word that is new for your students. We can present grammar in English. Some teachers, when being asked about what some exceptions when you can use Ukrainian during lessons, the first thing they usually think about is grammar. They think that when we need to explain a piece of grammar to our students, we can use Ukrainian, because it's obvious that if you want to explain something about nouns or verbs, it's the only way to do that is to use Ukrainian. But well, we'll talk about it a bit later, that we don't actually explain all the grammar to them. But here I just want to say that actually you can explain grammar without translation. We don't translate the texts. This is also the way to show the students that language is a tool, and actually we don't translate at all, and yes, it is possible. You will see how it is possible. You will see the example at the end of this session. Well, there are some exceptions to the rules, and they are not about grammar, but they are about individual students. So when we teach one-to-one, sometimes it is necessary to translate when they insist on that. Of course, it's necessary to explain to them first that Direct approach might be more beneficial for them, but unfortunately, not every student is prepared for that. And although sometimes they might agree to try, and I encourage you to offer them that. But still, they expect something more traditional, something that like maybe reminds them about their school years. And maybe the only reason they decided to buy these English classes, English lessons, is that they just want to be a schoolboy or schoolgirl again. So, all right, if you have already explained everything, if you offer them to try, if you have tried and they still insist on translating, then you can do that, because individual students have like paid for this exceptional, let's say, attitude. So, all right, yeah, in this case, it is possible, and we don't torture them with this direct method if they're not ready for that. But with all the other types of students, it is necessary to use English only. And today we will talk about how to do that and what to start with. So first of all, it's important to establish the rules at the first lesson. Then you need to explain the reasons to students. It is really important to grade your language and to adjust your language to your students' needs. And we will talk about all these things in more details. So the rules. The first one is that teacher doesn't speak language one at the lesson at all. Language one means your native language, which is Ukrainian, and you need to inform your students that you don't speak Ukrainian in the lesson. Maybe you can answer some questions at the end. Maybe you can talk to them like after the lesson. But during your teaching, everything will be in English. The second rule is that students are expected to use English as well. Although sometimes when it is not possible at all, they can use Ukrainian. But well, this time can be limited. Or you may explain to them that it's important to understand that it can be used only in some critical situations, like when it's impossible to say the same things in English. Otherwise, they need to try. Even if they make mistakes, even if they don't know some words, they still need to try to say these things in English. As I said, students might be given some time to ask questions in language one. It might be done at the end of the lesson, or with some groups, like fixed groups, or with your younger learners. You can just come up with some interesting rules. Like here we have an arrow to the picture. That is because in the picture you can see this hat. And there is an interesting idea which I saw at one of our teachers' lessons with children. They had a hat that they placed at in the middle of the desk. And if somebody really needed to use Ukrainian, they had to grab it and to put it in their head. And while they're in this head, they could use Ukrainian, but apparently only one person at a time. And yeah, in these critical situations, they could just take the hat and say something in Ukrainian, but then the hat was returned to the desk and they had to speak English again. So like some kind of rules when you can use your language one, and students need to understand that in all other situations, they just are not allowed to do that. And sometimes it is important to explain to them how it works, like in Ukrainian, of course, in language one, you need to take some time and to give them some reasoning why it is beneficial for them to use English during classes. And you need to tell them directly that you don't expect them to talk without mistakes, and you don't they don't have to know all the words like to convey the meaning that they want, but they just need to try, and you will help them if it's necessary. Yeah, so picture for motivation, and it brings us to the next thing that is important. Speak slowly. There is this compelling temptation to talk in English in a natural way. I mean, like to speak to your beginner students in the same way as you talk to other teachers, as you talk to your foreign friends and to advanced students, but it's basically not something that you need to do. Okay, back to the rules. So when to establish them? It depends on what kind of students you have. So if you work with young learners or fixed groups of adults or one-to-one students, you can do it at the first lesson that you have with this group. So basically, during your first class, you can decide on some rules that you are going to have, and it might be different with speak-up students because they don't have fixed groups. So for such learners, we have an Easy Start course that is designed to prepare the students for the lessons with groups later on. And let's start with the first type of students, so young learners, and the first lesson with them. What you can do, for example, with young learners, is to ask them to help you with establishing the rules with like some ideas about the rules. It's not only about using English during classes, but it's more about, like in general, if you have a group of teenagers, especially teenagers or children, you may ask them about their own ideas on what kind of rules are important during classes. And it might be interesting for you to listen to their ideas because they will definitely say something like, well, it can be done in Ukrainian, of course, yeah, to give them more opportunities to speak. They will say something like listen to the teacher or respect other learners and so on. So it's important to ask them, yeah, to give them the opportunity to set the rules for themselves, not only to give them the rules. And here you can guide them to add some rules that you planned to establish. Like, for example, you can ask them if they think that it's necessary to speak English, if they are learning English, yeah, and you can elicit from them this idea that, yeah, it's important, and you can add this rule to the other rules that they have offered. And you can write them down somewhere. For example, if they have their notebooks, they can write the rules on the first page or on the last page. And every time when they try to break the rule, you can come back to this list and remind them that it's necessary to do things like you have agreed. But when you work with adults, as I said, we have an Easy Start course. And here is the picture of some cards that I've made when I taught this course. Yeah, basically the idea of this course is to prepare our adults who've never encountered English before for working in an English speaking environment. And actually, this course, like just some brief information, which consists of four lessons in a group, plus the fifth lesson that is aimed to review everything and to talk about some organizational issues, like how to work with multimedia and how to book your classes, things like that. But basically, the main idea is the main goal of this course is not only to teach them about to be or adjectives or greetings, alphabet and things like those, but the main idea is to give them this taste, of having the lesson in English and comprehending everything. I will show you how it works. So yeah, as I said, it's 5 lessons, 4 lessons plus revision. At the first class, the first lesson, you need to start it in Ukrainian, of course, and like with some very basic information, like introducing yourself, asking them about their learning goals, their previous learning experience, like if they have ever learned English before, things like that. And then you need to inform them about this direct method that we are using, and to tell them that like after, like now we are having this 5 lessons in these small groups. Well, actually this course can be taught individually as well. Then it's fewer lessons, it's like 2.5, right? So, well, it doesn't matter now, but you need to tell them in Ukrainian that you see, guys, like now we are having this preparation classes, after which you're going to have lessons with other adults in a group. But all the lessons will be in English. And at this point, they are kind of shocked and saying something like, well, like I've never studied English before, I won't understand everything. And you're saying something like, all right, yeah, I understand. But, like today we're going to try. I think we have it on the slide here. Yeah. We're going to try it for just like 20 minutes. So now, like when we finish, we will start this trial period. So I will say something like start. And from that point, I'm going to use only English. I will show you some pictures, some cards, and I will say very simple words. You just need to repeat after me, or like if you don't understand, like you can say this expression, you need to teach them how to say, I don't understand. If you have questions that you want to ask in Ukrainian, just write them down. And after this 20 minutes, when we finish everything, I will say stop. And you will be able to ask me everything you want in Ukrainian. And yeah, I will answer all your questions. And usually students agree to try. So it's a task for you. Yes, a task of a teacher to provide them with very comprehensible input during these 20 minutes, and to use very few words and very simple words, and to show lots of pictures. Like fortunately, we do have pictures in our like you can see in the picture, I have some flashcards on my desk that like convey some meaning, and we do have like presentations for online classes. So usually students do understand everything during these 20 minutes, and after them, when I say stop, I ask them like, do you have any questions? You can ask in Ukrainian if you want. And they don't usually have any questions. They usually say something like, oh, like everything was clear. I don't know how, but like it was very simple. I understood everything. And here it comes. Like I say something like, you see, guys, like this is how it works. It will be the same during your group classes. Like you will be given very simple examples, very clear instructions, and you will see lots of visual aids. Yeah, so you will be able to understand everything. And like we can just discuss the same things in Ukrainian just to give them more confidence, like to show them that they have understood everything like as it should have been done. But yeah, you need to be ready that, of course, most students will be very skeptical about that. And sometimes this confidence might fade away, and you might need to come back again to the explanation how it works and that it's necessary. But the most important is this experience. So if you do conduct an Easy Start lesson, you need to put all your effort into helping your students to get this positive experience of understanding everything in English. The most important thing, if you want to be clear and if you want your students to understand everything, is to grade your language, of course. How to do that? You need to speak slowly. You need to speak in very short sentences. Sometimes they won't be even sentences, they won't be just phrases. Like instead of saying, please look at the picture and read, you just say read. Yeah, it might sound rude, but unfortunately, that's necessary here. Yeah, it's how it works. Try to use language they already know, like some general things. Sometimes you might just say yes or okay. Yeah, so try to use as many words as you can think of that they have already heard. And yeah, make pauses. Sometimes it's not very natural, I would say. Yeah, because when we speak, we use this connected language. Yeah, but with beginners, it's more important um, to be clear and to help them understand rather than speak very naturally. Right. So talking about instructions. Sometimes for teachers it's difficult and they just switch into Ukrainian because they want their students to understand what to do. But there are some other ways how to do that. The most important thing is to be sure that your students are looking at you while you are giving instructions. So keep eye contact with them. If you're working offline, like face to face, you need to test your book, which means that if you have your like book in your hands, you just need to show them the page you're working with and just to point to the exercise sometimes to give them this idea, like where on the page they might find it. So just open your books, page 23, exercise number 2. This is just in the book. Use pictures, props, gestures, whatever you can. Like here in the picture, the flight attendant is showing you. It's very similar to what you're doing when you want your students to work in pairs, and sometimes you don't even need to say that. You just say you, and you, like work together, and model the task. Which means that if you want your students, let's say, to open the brackets, sometimes you don't need to describe what the brackets are and what you want them to do. You just take the first sentence that you have in your exercise and do it together with your students. Now we are gradually moving to some types of lessons, and we will start with systems lessons. So teaching vocabulary. Um, Quite easy, right? Because at beginner level, usually vocabulary is quite simple. You teach things that you can see around yourself and which are quite obvious. I mean, like you don't teach some difficult words, like some philosophical terms or some like abstract ideas. So you can use pictures, of course. You can use gestures or face expressions. You can use hyponyms, and you can ask lots of CCQs. For example, is city big? Is a town big? So you can like give them very simple examples to see if they understand the meaning of some words. Probably need to explain about hyponyms that the idea here is that, for example, if you want to present the word, let's say fruit, you can use some examples like apples, oranges, grapes, or grapes are berries, right? Or if you want them to understand the word stationery, yeah, you can say that. Well, think about notebooks, pens, pencils, sticky notes. Yeah, right. So like you give them some examples of some more general thing. And this is just some like extra tip. Um, this is a game that you can see in the pictures. In our country, it is called crocodile, as far as I know. In English, it is called charades. When you need to explain the meaning of the word without saying it. This game might be very useful for teachers. I mean, like not during your classes, but if you have meetings with your friends, just try to play it with your friends because um, doing it a lot will help you to um, understand the logic behind some terms, behind some words, and you will understand the psychology of people, like how they understand the words, like what kind of things you need to show, and which things are more important to show than others. Um, like if you play this game a lot, it will be easier for you to explain some new vocabulary during your classes because you will know what to start with and like how to accompany your words with gestures and with some additional like pictures. So yeah, it might be useful. All right, now let's talk about grammar. As I have mentioned before, we don't explain the rules because otherwise your lesson might turn into something you can see in the picture, like rocket science, some formulas, like difficult stuff. But you will talk about guided discovery during sessions later. Sometimes it's just important to show students some example in the context and then to help them to come up with the rules themselves. So don't start your lesson if we are talking about a grammar lesson with something like, all right, today we are learning present perfect. So please write down number one, present perfect is used when we talk about some actions that started in the past and continue up till now. Like, no, it doesn't work like that. Your students might remember these rules, but without understanding, without lots of practice, without lots of exposure, it won't be possible for them to use this tense. So just forget about that. It doesn't matter. I mean, sorry, it doesn't matter in Ukrainian or in English. Just don't explain the rules. Use situations or examples instead. For example, talking about present perfect, you can give them some situation. Like you can write a sentence on the board and something like, I have visited 5 countries. Then you can ask them, like, how many countries have you visited? And you can elicit just numbers like 5, 3, 11, or like so on. And mm, you can ask them like further questions, like, is it clear from my question mm, when I visited these countries? Like, does it contain any information about like the point in the past when it happened? Well, things like that, yeah. But you can use simple language, you can use context, right? And like you can give them the idea about this. They need to feel the idea of this tense before they come up with the rule. And ask CCQs, again, concept checking questions. So, for example, if they see the sentence in present perfect, you can ask them, is it about past or present? So I have visited 5 countries. Is it about past or present? You can check whether they understand the meaning of this tense. Yeah, that it's about past, although it is called present perfect, right? And use timelines, schemes, or charts. They might be very useful because students will see everything that you want them to understand. This is an example of our grammar lesson that we have in our short course um, Grammar Intensive. And let's see what stages we have in this lesson. So we start with some presentation. This is the very first lesson. It's very simple. It's for learning about the verb to be. And here students are given the pictures of different famous people and some cards that they need to match to the pictures. The names on the cards might help them, right? So at this point, it's quite easy. They just need to recognize these people, and if they're working in groups, their group mates might help them. So when they've done it, we need to help them notice that when people introduce themselves, yeah, then like when one person is saying, I'm Nicole Kidman, yeah, so I'm, this is about one person, or Queen Elizabeth, yeah, one person, and you help them to notice that in some cases, like they say I'm, in other cases I am, and it's the same. So they just write here I'm, sorry, um, or I am, and in some pictures there are more than one person, like two or more, and they say different things. Yeah, we are, and so on. Like there is a chart there that they need to fill with the help of the teacher, of course. This is the presentation stage where they just notice some language and how it works, and they finally like sum it up in such kind of a chart. Then goes the practice stage or controlled practice, where they are given some sentences with the gaps and they need to think what is missing here. So they need to write the appropriate form of to be. They already have this chart filled. I mean, like here we have just blanks, but in the lesson it should be already like with some forms of to be. And finally, they have the production stage, or like freer practice stage, where they are given some examples with the sentences where to be is used, and they can prepare for some short dialogue and use some questions and ask their partners and give their answers about their names, their jobs, and so on. So as you can see here, we don't need to translate anything because it's quite easy to show the pictures and then to show the card with the name Marilyn Monroe and like to ask them to find the picture or to give them the opportunity to match if you work online. And it's not difficult to explain like what to do here. You don't need to say anything in Ukrainian like сьогодні ми вивчаємо дієслово to be. Запишіть його форми. Right? You don't need to say that. It will be clear and quite obvious after they do this task. All right. Briefly, we need to talk about pronunciation. Again, we don't explain the rules. It's too, it might be too overwhelming for our students to think about all this articulation and things that, like muscles that work there. You don't need to teach them all transcription symbols at once because some teachers, like I saw such examples when they start teaching English with beginner students, they just start the lesson with all the possible combinations of letters and how they might be pronounced, and in which case which letter is silent and which is pronounced differently, and like all the symbols that we have for transcription. Yeah, you don't need to do that because first of all, it's too complicated. Students won't be able to use it after this lesson, and it can discourage them. Yeah, it's like if you come to the first class and you are given all this information, this bunch of information, yeah, it might seem like this language is impossible to learn. I do know that some European languages are different, and in some languages it's like just 2 or 3 rules. The teacher just says that, you know, the stress is on the like last syllable all the time, except for when the word finishes in let's say like N or S, and this letter is pronounced differently in this case, and this letter is pronounced differently in this case, and that's it. Like all you need to remember is just like 3 rules, and you can read any text correctly without like just knowing these 3 rules. English is not the case, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, but here it's better just to remember the word and how it sounds. So occasionally you might give them some transcription symbols, like if it's appropriate, if they occur during your practice, and it's necessary for students to show that the sound is different from the other, for example, but generally don't show them everything at once because they won't remember it anyway. And inform your students that when they encounter a new word, it is possible to find it online and or in a online dictionary, and they can hear the word that they can hear and repeat. For some students, it might be even more useful than just learning how to read transcription symbols, because just copying the pronunciation will help them to train their listening skills as well. And here are some examples of tasks that might be given to students. For example, here, yeah, we have two sounds, z and s. And what the students need to do is just to listen to the word and to repeat it and to spot the difference. Then they might be given some more examples. Here we have examples of the verbs in present simple third person singular, and they might spot that the same letter can be pronounced differently. Yeah, so it is given for them as an example, and then you are asking questions. Like as a teacher, you might ask questions about like why or what influences this sound, like what influences the decision of pronouncing this this end in a different way. And then finally again, it's like freer practice. They need to listen to a sentence and make plural, saying the ending correctly. Again, you don't need to translate anything here. As you can see, everything can be taught in English. Yeah, of course, they might not know that some sounds are called like voiced or unvoiced. Yeah, but you can just try the examples. You can say like after, you don't need to say vowels. Yeah, you can say after a, e, o, u, and n, b, d. Yeah, they will understand the general idea. All right, skills lessons. So reading. When we read in Ukrainian, when we read in our language one, we don't always read all the words. And it's important to understand that because we don't usually pay attention to that. I mean, like, if you look at some article on Facebook or like online, sometimes you just read, how do we call it? Like, not between the lines, but we read um, like horizontal, no, vertically. Well, I mean that or like think about when you prepared for your university exams, and sometimes you had more text that you could um, digest. Yeah, so you just had to look through it without like reading every single word and understanding everything. So we do that all the time in our language one, but when it comes to learning another a foreign language, we forget about that and we just want to understand everything. So sometimes you need to teach your students to do this simple thing, this technique that we use, which is called skimming or scanning. There are two different techniques. I mean, like skimming, it's when you don't read everything in detail. You just look through the text very, very quickly, skipping some words you might not understand just in order to get a general idea, right? Scanning is when you're again, you're reading the text quickly, but just to find some particular information. And yeah, you might give your students the task to do something that requires these techniques, but sometimes you need to add some extra explanation and maybe even to do it in Ukrainian to explain to them that it's necessary sometimes to skip the words they don't understand. Yeah, it might be painful for them, but they need to try to do that. Pre-teach keywords. Even before they work with the text using skimming or scanning, they need to be given the task. For example, a typical task for skimming is like find the best title for the text. So to find the title, they need to understand the general idea of the text, yeah? Or match the paragraphs with their possible titles, like something like that. But there might be some words that are important for general understanding. So without knowing the meaning of these words, the students won't be able to accomplish this task. Not all unknown words are keywords. It's important to understand you don't need to pre-teach all the words that your students don't know. And it's a mistake to give them a task when they work with the text for the first time and to say something like, well, read the text, take your time, underline all the words that you don't know, because in this way you teach them to read the text in detail all the time, and it will be difficult for them in future to deal with the text with unknown words, but they will have to do that a lot. Like, just think about it. If you want to find some information and you can't find it in Ukrainian, and you just like um, came across some English website, but there is an article that contains this information with maybe like 5 to 10 unknown words, I think it will be still easy for you to understand this article and at least to understand whether it's worth reading and it's necessary for you to like read it more slowly. But to be able to understand that, you need to be able to look through it and to get the general idea out of it. Um, so the students need to know how to work with the text when there are still some unknown words, but you, as a teacher, you need to um, anticipate what words might be important for understanding the general meaning, and you need to pre-teach them before they read the text for the first time. Don't read the text out loud in groups. There are lots of reasons for that. First of all, if you think that it will help you to train pronunciation, it's not the case, because as we have already discussed, English has lots of words that are difficult to predict. I mean, like how to pronounce them, because lots of rules and exceptions to them. It might be stressful for the students to read the text that they might make mistakes in and mispronounce some words. The second thing is that if you're working with a group of students, they might have different pace of reading, and some students might read faster. It will be more difficult for them to listen to somebody who is reading slower. Then they might be distracted by their own voice or the voice of their group mates. And the main idea of reading, like if you have a reading lesson and if you want them to learn how to read, the main idea here is that you are working on reading, not on pronunciation, and you want them to understand the text rather than to pronounce everything correctly. So if they are distracted, they will miss the meaning. And set the time limits. It's important for the gist reading when they read the text for the first time. And if you give them all the time that they need, they might just read everything in detail again and pay attention to unknown words. But if you want to give them this idea that they do need to read everything quickly and to get the general meaning, then they just need to read it in 3 minutes, for example. So they don't have much time and their task is just to read the text. Here is an example of a practical skills workshop that we have in our school. And for practical skills lessons at beginner level, our goal is not only to teach them to read, but also to, like, we have some combination of vocabulary lesson here and reading lesson. So we start with some flashcards with pictures where they see different professions. Here the topic is work. And they are given some flashcards with the names of these professions. They have to match them. I would recommend to start just with pictures and to ask them first if they know the names of these professions. And if they don't, just telling them these words, asking them to repeat it and drilling them with them to work on pronunciation. And then they might see how these words are spelled. And they might see them in written form and match them with the pictures in order to notice and like recall the meaning of these words. Then they are given this worksheet where they have to write down the words first under the pictures. So again, they kind of recall the meanings. And then they have an exercise with the sentences where they need to put these names of professions into the sentences, again, like practicing using them in context. After that, they have a text, and here comes actually the reading part, where they have like 5 paragraphs about different people. They need to read them and to understand what their profession is. So this is a gist reading task. They don't need to understand everything. They just need to find out what the profession of the person is and write down the name of the profession. After that, when they have read for the first time and they have done this task quickly, they are given the second exercise for more detailed reading. So here it's true or false. So at this point, you can ask them to read the text again. You can give them more time and to find the information that is necessary for deciding whether the sentences are true or false. At the end, they have some kind of freer practice. And I think here are 2 students. They work in pairs. 2 students are given different cards. In one picture, they can see, they have the same picture with the same number of people, and they see their the information about their jobs. So they need to share the information. They need to ask each other some questions, and the other person who has the information about the person that the first student doesn't have the information about, they just like need to say it out loud. Yet they just share the information to come up with the ideas that they are missing. So if we look here, we can see that you don't need to translate a lot. I mean, you might even like go without translation in this case, because when you show the picture, you just ask like, what can you see? And they can see teacher, like without article. I think they will say like teacher, policeman, artist, or you can help them. You can say a teacher and ask them to repeat like a teacher, like now you a teacher. Then you give them the flashcards. You ask them like match. I think it's quite obvious like what you need to do if you have pictures and the words. Okay, you give them the worksheet. So write down professions. Yeah, they write down the names of professions. Okay, exercise 1. And here comes the modeling. Yeah, you can take the first sentence and you can say, arrests criminals. At this point, they might have already said the correct answer, or if they haven't, you can prompt them. You can say, who is it? A teacher arrests criminals? No. An artist arrests, or we don't have an here, yeah. A doctor arrests criminal? No. And like you elicit the correct answer from them. You show them that you need to write it. Yeah, so write down a policeman arrests criminals. Okay, what about number 2? And they do it after that. Then comes the text. Again, you need to look through it before the lesson. You need to decide whether there are any keywords that you need to pre-teach. And you do that. And then you say read and write the profession. Quite easy, right? Exercise number 2. Read the text. Is it true or false? Yeah, and you can read the first sentence, which is an example with your students. Okay, student 1. Again, you can model. You can take, if you have a big group, you can take a pair of stronger students, and you can ask them. So, student 1, student 2. Student 1 has information about number 1. Tom works in hospital. Student 2, you don't have information. So you can ask, what is his name? Student one. Student one needs to say like, his name is Tom. Okay. What does he do? He works in hospital. All right. So what is Tom's profession? And they say the answer. Yeah. So it's easy to do it, and you don't need to say anything in Ukrainian. Okay, the next type of lessons might be listening, and it's very close to reading because here again, you need to inform your students that they need to learn how to listen for gist. They don't need to understand every single word. But sometimes students expect too much too fast. So you need to help them to set realistic goals. Right, they want to understand everything, every single word. You need to tell them that it's impossible and it's okay. Sometimes we have this compelling temptation to give them scripts in order to help them understand everything. But you need to remember that scripts make listening reading, and it's a good idea for a reading lesson if you want them to know how the words are pronounced. But if you want them to learn how to listen and to understand everything from the audio, you need to inform them that it's necessary um, to listen without knowing everything that they hear, without understanding everything that they hear. And it's okay if they understand just a few words. It's still okay. Um, so like you can give them some task that might help them to focus on like just general meaning or a few words they understand or the feelings of the speakers and so on. So help like teach them to listen for gist and encourage them to listen more at home. I do believe that the skill might be mastered only by like lots of um, by having lots of exposure to the language. So it's important to listen a lot, and listening in the classroom is never enough. You need to give your students some tasks. Well, when it comes to adults, they do have their multimedia classes, and they have to listen a lot while doing them. But when it comes to face-to-face students or to young learners, you need to maybe send them some audios and like give them the task to listen to it a lot of times before they look at the script. And some other important techniques that you may need are constant recycling, scaffolding, and giving motivating feedback. We will talk about them in a minute. So what is recycling? It is practicing language that learners have seen previously. When it comes to beginners, some teachers might say that if they are true beginners, probably it might be the first time they see the language and they know nothing about it. But it's not the case. They still know something like yes, no. And don't forget that they have their Easy Start course. So during these classes, they learn the verb to be, some adjectives, greetings, numbers, letters, the alphabet, right? So what can you do during every lesson is you can ask them to spell the word. You can ask them simple questions like, are you tired? Are you happy? Is it cold? Lots of things with these topics. Actually, you just need to look at the topics of the previous level, or if you are working with the starter level, you need to look at the topics of the Easy Start course, and you will understand what kind of things your learners have already encountered, and you have to use them. It's a good idea to use them during every lesson with starters to give them some confidence and to help them recall some important information. Scaffolding. What is this? It's a method where teachers offer a particular kind of support to students as they learn and develop a new concept or skill. Basically, I think that modeling is like a type of scaffolding. This is a very good picture that shows the idea. So instead of saying draw a dog, you need to like facilitate it. You need to give them all the steps that they need to do in order to be successful in this task. We have some examples from the textbook, but I think we will skip them because the most important here is just to understand that everything that seems obvious to you is definitely not obvious for your students. So you just need to remember that they need a lot of extra help, and they need to whatever exercise you want them to do, you need to think beforehand, like what things you need to teach them before doing this exercise that will help them to do it successfully. Praising students. Like if you think about a child who repeats some parts of language all the time, or tries to say something for the first time, usually children get lots of praise from their parents when they do something correctly for the first time. And when they make mistakes, sometimes they are corrected, but not all the time. So if adults can understand them, sometimes they just don't correct the mistakes. But when we are students in the classroom, sometimes it's vice versa. Like we are corrected all the time, and at the same time, when we say something correctly, the teacher just ignores that. It shouldn't be like that. I mean, like you need to notice all things that your students achieve, and you need to give them lots of praise for them. But when they make mistakes, you need to be very kind and patient. And sometimes, if they haven't learned this topic before, or if mistake can be ignored, I mean, like if the meaning is still clear, even though the student makes the mistake, you don't need to correct them all the time. You just need to give them this opportunity to use the language and to try, like to play with it, to practice it. But don't forget to praise them. It's really important, and do it in a different way. I mean, just don't say just good job all the time. Like use different phrases, like well done, right you are, excellent, fantastic, great. Yeah, give them all this comprehensible input again that they can take with them and use them later on in their life. And now we are going to watch some parts of the lesson with starter students. This is a practical skills workshop with our experienced teacher. And we will see how some things might be done, things that we have already discussed before. So let's watch it.
Victoria, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Karina, good evening.
Hello.
Karina, how are you?
I'm
How
fine,
is your
thank
day?
you. Good.
Is it interesting day, busy day, relaxing day?
Busy.
All right. Victoria, what about you?
So this is a warm up, and the teacher is asking questions that might help students to switch from Ukrainian to English. As you can see, she uses very clear questions, like very simple questions, and she uses the same things that students have learned during their Easy Start course. So the questions with to be, and some adjectives from Easy Start like tired, happy, and so on. And students answer in English. Let's continue.
And we speak about places in a city or a town. Каріна, Надія, Світлана, Вікторія. City and town. What is it?
New York.
So here we can see the example of a CCQ question, but like the question isn't very good itself. I mean, like, what is it might be too difficult for students to define, but to define the cities or towns. But as you saw, the student came up with a very nice answer. Yeah, they gave an example, New York. Yeah, so now all the teacher has to do is just to differentiate, to distinguish, like, is New York City or a city or a town. Yeah, so and a teacher can ask some more questions, like, is a city big or is a town big? We have already discussed this question. So instead of translating or explaining everything in Ukrainian, you can ask simple questions to help students understand the difference.
And we speak about places in a city or
Okay, let's continue.
what is place? Cafe. Yes. So Victoria, Svetlana, Каріна, Надія. Cinema.
Theater. Theater.
Yeah, theater. Good. What else?
So here, instead of translating the word places, the teacher gives an example, cafe, yeah? And students understand and they start giving examples from their experience, from their vocabulary. They say what they remember and the teacher writes everything on the board.
Restaurant.
Yeah, gym.
So the student makes a mistake with pronunciation, so the teacher corrects the mistake. Yes, she says this word correctly and writes it down on the board. All right, let's continue.
What is what else? Hospital, shop. Okay, now look at the photo. Look at the places. And Valentina, what is it?
So here the students see the picture, and the words. Again, it's very similar to the lesson that I showed you. They need to match the words and the picture. They have already discussed some, they have already pronounced, drilled some words that they need. So it's easier for them now to spot them and to read them correctly. All right, what happens here?
Valentina, can you read the question?
What's the names of this place?
Valentina, what is it?
Школьники.
And place. What is the place?
Пишут.
Place. What is place? Hospital, supermarket, cafe.
Школа.
Yes. And
No,
in
show.
English,
Show.
it's
School.
School. Yes. Who can spell school? School.
S.
It's
K. K.
K or C?
C.
So as you can see, the teacher elicited this word from the student. Then she corrected the pronunciation and asked to spell it. So again, we can recall some information from EasyStart, and we can say the letters, which will help the students to remember how the word is spelled. And of course, they do it with all the other pictures as well. Okay, this is the next part of this lesson, so let's watch it.
Хрещатик Street, Hill Road.
Вулиця.
Mhm. Yes. Also, we have Green Street. Also, Park Road and Bond Street. Mhm. Now, let's read the sentences. Світлана, can you read first?
Можна питання? Чим відрізняється стріт від рід?
Площа.
Street and road.
Да, road.
Who can help? What is road?
Площа, мабуть, так?
Square, road. It's square and road.
Сквер.
No, just a second. I will show you. So, what is street? Street.
Вулиця.
Вулиця.
Yes, and road. It's
Тоже вулиця.
this.
Проспект.
А, дорога.
Дорога.
Yes, but it's name.
Okay, so the students didn't understand something, the difference between two words that the teacher explained. And they asked a question in Ukrainian. But instead of translating, the teacher just showed the picture and the students understood what this word meant. Very nice example. Okay.
So, what questions do you have? Які зараз у вас або є питання, або виникали щодо напрямків?
This is the end of the lesson.
Валентина, Вікторія, Світлана, Надія, Каріна. Можливо, щось не зрозуміло.
Скажіть, я скажу, що за моєю спиною, так? Чи там за супермаркетом той шоп. Як мені сказати за?
Позаду це behind. Behind.
So when there are 5 minutes left till the end of the lesson, the teacher asked the students if they had any questions, and she asked it in Ukrainian, so now they could discuss everything that wasn't clear. But it didn't impede the general flow of the lesson. I mean, all the lesson was taught in English. Everything was conducted in, all the meanings were conveyed in English, and students understood everything. And like they had this 55 minutes of English environment. And after that, if they had some questions, they were encouraged to ask them at the end of this lesson. So you can see that this is possible.
So,
all right, and as we are finishing, I just want to remind you that you need to remind yourselves and the students why we do that. Here you can see this swimming pool theme, just because English, like learning to speak English is like learning any other skill. It's not a subject, it's a skill that you need to master. And if you want to learn how to swim, you would agree it's kind of useless just to read about that or to talk about that or to think about some muscles that take part in swimming. But all you need to do is just to come to the swimming pool and to try, maybe starting not in the deep water, so being like safe, but at the same time you need to be in the water. You need to try, you need to do something rather than just think about doing it. So this is the main reason why we need to teach in English, because when you give students the opportunity to hear the language and to use the language, you teach them how to start doing something instead of just thinking about it. Be kind to yourself. As a teacher, it might be challenging for you at the beginning. There are two different extreme points. On one hand, you can just give up and you can do everything in Ukrainian if you fail to do it in English. But on the other hand, you can just do like you can just speak only English during your classes, even though your students don't understand you. And after that, you can come to your head of studies and say, like, you know, like it doesn't work. Students just don't understand me. I tried, and you see this method isn't working. But the problem is that you did something not in the right way. That's why, yeah, like just you need to try, you need to practice, you need to like see what works better for you and for your students. But of course, if it doesn't work, you can translate in critical situations, but don't be too kind to yourself. So don't give up. I mean, don't think, okay, I can't do it, so I will do everything in a traditional way. Like, no, you need to do it, to try again, but just analyze your mistakes and reflect on them. So it's okay if you can't do it immediately, but it's not okay if you don't keep trying. So this is the same that I have said. You just need to believe that it can work. Like if it's too difficult for you at the beginning, just attend the classes of other teachers who can do it well, and try to notice what they do differently, and like what techniques they are using, so that you can copy them and you can like maybe like borrow some ideas from them. Thank you for watching this webinar. I hope it was useful, and I hope you will try to conduct your lessons in English with beginner students, and I hope it will be successful. So thank you and see you. Bye.